once again for Bobcat Central. Ashley Washburn joining me again this morning. Interesting past couple of days for both the men's and women's teams. Women's team, the week started a little slow but finished strong. Let's talk about them first.
I would say you're being real nice with the real slow. Let's just be frank. It was not a good game.
Yeah.
It's not a team that we've seen this year for Montana State, and Binford said that herself when I interviewed her earlier this week. 29-point loss on the road to Northern Arizona, but I will say, and we've talked about it before, the travel to get to Flagstaff is not easy. Football is a lot different where they do get to charter because you're traveling with 100 people. When you're doing basketball, the Big Sky doesn't charter for basketball. And so they had to take 2 flights to get to Phoenix, and then you hop on, a bus and drive the 2.5 hours up into, 5,000-6,000 feet elevation. And so it's a really big toll on the body. And talking to Binford this week, they really wanted to have a full practice in Flagstaff because they played at Wyoming earlier and they did a really short practice and they felt like they came out really flat against Wyoming. So they tried to change it up this week, and still it was just, 29-point loss. And a big part of that was turnovers. They had a season-high 23 turnovers, and for a team that is, the best in the Big Sky when it comes to that turnover margin, it was a real shock. And it's just, NAU plays a really fast pace of basketball, and they knew that going to that game, but there was just no way to stop it, and they were able to run away with that game literally and figuratively.
The thing that I've always told my kids is it's not the mistake you make, it's what you do next.
Absolutely.
What they did next was much better.
It was much better. I mean, and to consider, you still have to make the drive down to Phoenix and fly and go to Greeley and take 2 bus rides. I mean, it's not an easy travel, but they bounced back in dominant fashion, which is what you needed. I mean, they threw that 29-point loss out the window, stuck together, regrouped, came into UNC, and, even though that they split the week, they still have a 1-game lead in the Big Sky. I mean, the way that it's shaping out right now, and they got a lot of help from Montana over the hill this past week because Montana and Montana State, they play home and away kind of thing where they were then eventually in Flagstaff after that. Montana was able to pull out the win against NAU. They're really starting to catch fire, but because of that, it's now Montana State in first with a 1-game lead, and you got Montana right underneath them. So they're pretty much more than likely. It really comes down to these 2 games. You still have to win the 2 games that are ahead this week, which is Weber State and Idaho State. But Cat Grizz, when it's back in Bozeman next week, you might be seeing some confetti flying, hopefully, for Montana State if they're able to close it out.
Fantastic stuff. On the men's side, the only score that matters is the score at the end of the game, and really, thankfully, the game was just as long as it needed to be for the men, at least.
43 seconds.
43 seconds, that's all it was.
43 seconds is all Montana State led that game, but at the end, it's who's on top when that final buzzer sounds, and it was Montana State. Now, if we just start from the beginning of that game, NAU, even though, their record's not great, they are a great team, and we've talked about it before. The Big Sky is deep this year. Granted, you've got Eastern Washington at the top, still undefeated, but if you take a look at the Eastern Washington games, there's a lot of games that they're finally being able to pull it out in the last couple seconds. There's a lot of talent this year, and NAU is part of that talent. They were giving Montana State problems early. They were getting hot from the field. Montana State wasn't able to buy a shot. But then kind of what happened in that game is Jabril Bello, man, back-to-back blocks in a matter of 45 seconds to eventually become Montana State's all-time blocks leader, which is awesome. But that kind of started to turn the page for Montana State. They began to chip away at that lead, and when they needed to take the lead, they did right at the end with about a minute left, and it was a little back and forth again, but Great Osipor was able to do what Great Osipor does, just make some plays on that low block and able to take the lead with the last 3 seconds to eventually win that game. So really big win for them, and obviously then you had Northern Colorado on Saturday. They were actually able to hit a 3, which is great. Tyler Patterson hit, I think it was 5 for 9 behind the arc. So 2 huge great wins, and they're kind of on the same cusp of they need to win out because now you're hoping Eastern Washington can lose one, and that's that last game of the year for Montana State before you get to that Big Sky tournament. And if Eastern Washington can drop one and Montana State can win out, then you're also playing for a Big Sky championship.
Before we wrap this up, then, you get a chance to talk to the coaches every week. You get a chance to do this. How do you think their headspace is? I mean, I'm not asking you to critique that. Other than 29-point loss in that, how do you think the coaches are this point in the season, because it's getting down to the nitty gritty in that. How do you think they had their headspace is right now?
That was actually a question I asked Binford when we were taping Bobcat Insider this week, and I think the biggest thing is there's still so much level for improvement. You see that Northern Colorado game on both sides, the men and the women, and they're playing great basketball. I mean, at the end of that women's game, they were shooting 75% from the field in that fourth quarter. I mean, they were lights out. But to still look at a team and be in first in the Big Sky and say, hey, there's still a lot of improvement that needs to be done getting into that's kind of where they're at right now. Is you've got 6 games left before it goes to Boise, and that's the hard part about playing, in a mid-major like the Big Sky is if you want to go dancing in March, you have to win that tournament. And it's really going to come down to who's playing the best basketball when that turns around. And so these next 6 games, it's really just about improving and getting to that peak level of performance. That way, when you're entering the tournament, there's no trying to clean things up as fast as you can. It's we're playing our best basketball, and hopefully we're dancing the week after that.
Same for the men. I mean, do you think they're?
Yeah, Danny Sprinkle.
You're never where you want to be. It's hard to tell with Coach Sprinkles.
Danny
He never gives you that answer.
He was very frank and said, they played horrible against NAU. I mean, yes, they were able to pull out the win, and that second half was way different than the first half. But they said we need to play 40 minutes straight of our best basketball. And when you've got a team like Eastern Washington that's in the mix that hasn't lost in a very, very long time, I don't think the last time that they've lost was last year. At this point, if you really look at it that way, you need to play your best level of basketball. And at that point, it's also taking it to the next step. So it's great to hear when you're seeing the two teams like this on the court. They're playing at great levels of basketball. But to know that the coach is seeing that they could even get to a different level, I'm excited to see what that's going to be, because I'm already getting impressed just watching on the sidelines. So
fantastic.
Let's go dancing. I'm trying to go traveling again in March.
I know you are, and we're going to just see if we can. I'm going to give all the positive thoughts I can, because that's the only thing I bring to the game of basketball at this point. Again, Ashley Washburn joining me this morning. Next week we'll chat and see.
I was going to say, we're going to talk about Cat Grizz next week.
It'll be pre-Cat Grizz next week.
There's going to be a lot to talk about next week.
Buckle up. That's the motto right now. Ashley, thank you very much. You're watching Montana This Morning.